Polls.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. And we thank you for being here, Barnaby.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're cracking open this stack of research you sent over, all focused on, well, the deep psychology of negotiation.
Yeah, we're taking that complex theory and boiling it down, turning it into, actionable leverage.
Exactly. We're talking about negotiation jujitsu, that sort of secret art of guiding sophisticated buyers exactly where you want them, but without ever seeming like you're pushing them. No hard tactics.
That's the mission, isn't it? To pull out those key psychological levers, the ones that make the buyer genuinely believe the final terms, the pace, the whole frame, were actually their idea all along.
Right.
And look, we have to start by just dropping this whole myth of this super aggressive deal maker. Negotiating well isn't really about aggression.
Cool.
It's much more about understanding the buyer's momentum, their energy, and, well, using it against them, just like the core idea in jiu-jitsu.
Okay, I like that analogy.
And a key takeaway right up front. Not all investors are these mythical sharks you read about. Sometimes, honestly, they're just fish in better suits.
Fish in better suits. I like that.
And they panic, They panicked under the right kind of psychological pressure.
Okay, that immediately reframes it for me. If we can spot their anxiety, maybe we can leverage it, which I guess takes us right into our first section, challenging how we usually think about power in these deals. We're kind of conditioned, aren't we, to think power is volume, big money, loud demands. But these sources are saying the real power in a deal is quieter, more about time.
Exactly. What's really striking is how clear the definition is across the board here. Power is control of the clock. Simple as that.
Control of the clock.
In any deal, look closely, and you'll see one person is subconsciously chasing time. They're worried about deadlines, maybe other options falling through. The other person, they control the clock. They're comfortable with delay.
Okay, wait, I have to push back a bit there. Doesn't the buyer often have the time advantage? Especially if they're well-funded, looking at multiple deals. How does a seller who usually wants to close by a certain date actually get control of that clock?
That's a really critical question. Yeah. And you don't gain control by making demands about time. It's more subtle. You achieve what the sources call seller's gravity.
Seller's gravity. Okay, unpack that.
Gravity is this state of being calm, totally prepared, and, this is crucial, often silent. You establish yourself as the one who's done the homework, who's ready, and who's just waiting calmly for the next necessary step, whether that's information or a decision from them.
Okay.
If the buyer senses you're genuinely not in a rush, their own internal clock, their anxieties about time slipping away start pulling them towards you, you become this, immovable object.
So gravity is the opposite of being loud and demanding. That makes perfect sense. There's a note here that nails it. The loudest negotiator rarely wins. The quietest one rarely loses.
That's the one.
So power isn't about how big your offer is necessarily. It's about the discipline you show, the timing of your response.
And this control over timing, this gravity, leads straight into the first major rule we need to talk about. Control the frame.
Control the frame, meaning the narrative.
Precisely. Whoever successfully defines the context, the story of the conversation, they control the deal. It's fundamental.
Okay, let's make that concrete. Common scenario. Buyer tries to knock the price down. They say something like, look, we need a 10% cut here to account for integration risk. Now you're talking about risk, right? They've set the frame.
Exactly. And if you accept that frame, if you start arguing about how much risk there is or defending against it, you've already lost ground.
So what's the move?
Immediate reframing. You have to interrupt their narrative, shift it. So you pivot from talking about risk to talking about, say, value based on demonstrated performance.
How'd that sound?
You might say something like, okay, I understand you're concerned about risk, but let's remember our valuation is grounded in X years of sustained documented performance. Now, if you're calculating risk, you must also be calculating the potential future returns based on that performance. Why don't you walk us through how you're valuing that proven upside?
Wow. Okay, so you've just flipped it. Now the burden of proof is on them.
Right. You're not defending your price anymore.
You're inviting them to justify theirs, to explain why they should pay less for something that clearly works.
Exactly right. We stop arguing about their number and we start arguing about the underlying assumptions behind their number. The second you start haggling over the 10% they threw out, you've bought into their frame. You've lost the initiative.
Control the frame, control the story. Control the story, dictate the speed, and set the stage for the silent arsenal. This is where we get into maybe the most powerful and definitely the most counterintuitive tool, silence itself.
Oh, yeah. Silence is so underrated.
Mhm.
And the tactic is almost laughably simple.
Which is?
State your number or respond to their offer. And then just stop talking completely. Let the buyer be the one to fill that uncomfortable void.
Why does that work so well?
Well, the human brain hates unresolved tension, right? And silence in a high-stakes situation like a negotiation creates massive tensions.
Yeah.
The buyer will often start, well, negotiating against themselves. They'll rush to break the silence, and in doing so, might lower their own expectations or start revealing concessions.
This isn't just waiting around, though. The sources actually break it down, don't they? There's like a psychological pressure scale based on how long the pause is. We're talking seconds here, not minutes.
Yeah, the data on this is pretty compelling. Even a 5-second pause after you state a firm number creates noticeable discomfort.
Just 5 seconds.
It forces the buyer to actually sit with what you just said, to internalize it.
Okay, then what about 10 seconds?
10 seconds. That really ramps it up. That creates real pressure. The buyer's mind starts racing. Did I lowball them? Did I offend them? Are they walking away?
And then the big one, 15 seconds.
15 seconds is often where the truth comes out. That's the money shot. The buyers need to break that tension. Becomes overwhelming. They might blurt out their maximum price, reveal their biggest fear about the deal, or give you the real reason behind their low offer. They just over-explain because the silence feels like the deal is dead.
Incredible. So the advice is basically, if you can't outsmart the buyer, out-silence them. That's huge leverage from just shutting up.
And silence, of course, is a key part of timing, that invisible lever in any deal. Look, there's this common misconception, isn't there? That speed equals success.
Yeah, everyone wants to close fast.
Right. Sellers often see a quick close as a win, but honestly, fast closings often signal a seller who is maybe a bit desperate, who probably left money on the table.
Meaning the patient sellers, the ones using that gravity and controlling the clock, they tend to make more money because the delay gives them time to gather more data, evaluate options properly.
Exactly. Rushing is almost always a sign you're surrendering leverage.
So patience pays.
But it's not about dragging your feet unnecessarily. Seasoned negotiators, they don't avoid speed altogether. They use controlled urgency.
What does that look like in practice?
They move fast on the administrative stuff, paperwork, process details, but they move very slowly on the price itself. The sources say, sprint on details, crawl on dollars.
I like that. Sprint on details, crawl on dollars. So you show you're competent and efficient by handling logistics quickly. That builds momentum, shows respect for their time too.
Right. But you demonstrate absolute financial discipline when it comes to the core valuation. You respect the process, but you won't be rushed on value.
Okay, so we've got control over time through gravity and patience, and we've got silence as a weapon.
Yeah.
Now, how do we actively guide the buyer to the conclusion we want? This brings us to the illusion of choice, starting with anchoring.
Right, anchoring. It's that well-known cognitive bias, isn't it? People lean really heavily on the first piece of information they get.
The first number they hear sets the stage.
Exactly. So you set a baseline offer that's maybe slightly high, but, and this is critical, it has to be backed by solid logic, data, not just wishful thinking. Then any subsequent figures, including your actual target price, feel more reasonable just by comparison. It's all relative.
And once you've set that anchor, you shift the dynamic again, right? You stop asking if they'll buy.
And you start presenting them with options. So the question implicitly becomes how they will buy.
This taps into ownership psychology, doesn't it?
Absolutely. People rarely push back hard against something they feel they help create or choose. If you give them, say, 2 acceptable paths forward, they internalize the decision. It feels like their choice, not like you're forcing their hand.
Can you give us a quick example? Let's say the anchor price was, I don't know, $10 million.
Yeah.
How would you frame options?
Okay, sure. So maybe you present option A, the full performance price. Let's say $9.8 million, all cash, quick close in 30 days, nice clean terms.
Straightforward.
Then option B, the discounted price. Maybe $9.2 million, a significant discount. I know this option requires seller financing for, say, 50% of that price, paid out over 3 years.
Ah, okay. So for the listener, option B looks tempting with that big discount up front, but the buyer takes on more complexity, more risk, and keeps the seller involved financially for longer.
Precisely. They're choosing between speed and simplicity versus a lower price with strings attached.
And either way, the seller likely gets close to their target value, just structured differently.
That's often the goal. The buyer feels good about getting a discount or specific terms they valued, but you, the seller, might get interest income or better security. They feel like they steered the negotiation. Remember that quote, "Give them the steering wheel, just make sure it's your car."
Love it. Okay, that ties nicely into pacing, the rhythm of the negotiation. It's not just words and numbers, it's the tempo. And the seller should be setting that tempo.
You're the conductor, essentially. Not necessarily setting the emotional tone, but definitely the pace. If the buyer starts rushing you, you deliberately slow down your response time. If they stall unnecessarily, maybe you gently speed up the cadence on administrative items, keep things moving.
So mirroring, but with control.
Right. When buyers sense you can match their pace or strategically counter it without ever losing your composure, without panicking, you instantly come across as the calm, rational one, the adult in the room.
And this patient controlled pacing helps avoid that critical failure point you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. Deals rarely fall apart over minor disagreements on price, fundamentally. They collapse because someone lost their nerve in a moment of silence, or they rushed a key decision under pressure.
Which brings us back to silence again. You have to be ready for rejection, for a no. What happens the moment they say no?
You stop talking. Instantly. If you immediately jump in and start trying to resell or justify your price after they've said no, you're basically validating their rejection. You undermine your own position. The deal often dies right there in the words spoken after the no.
That takes discipline, which leads us perfectly into the final pieces, leverage without being aggressive, and just pure emotional discipline.
Yeah, leverage isn't about making threats. It's much more like graceful awareness. It's that quiet confidence that comes from knowing you could genuinely walk away from this deal and still be okay. Maybe you have other interested buyers. Maybe the asset itself is performing great as is. You don't need this specific deal to close.
So instead of threats, the sources talk about using reminders. How does a reminder sound different from a threat?
Okay, a threat sounds like, look, if you don't meet my price by Friday, I'm calling the other buyer. It's confrontational.
Right. Aggressive.
A reminder is much softer, more factual, it might sound like. We understand your position on pricing. We remain confident in our current valuation, which, as you know, has also attracted interest from Party X. Regardless of the outcome here, our focus remains on operating this asset at peak performance, ensuring its continued value.
Ah, I see. You're subtly reminding them of the asset's inherent value, maybe mentioning other interest factually, but without any ultimatum. You're also reminding them they're the ones taking on risk by buying, replacing your certainty.
Exactly. And that certainty you possess has inherent value. And underpinning all of this, the framing, the silence, the timing, the leverage, is the real secret weapon, emotional discipline.
This seems crucial. The sources call negotiation emotional warfare disguised as math.
That's a great line, isn't it? Because it's true. If they attack your price, you have to stay completely calm, almost detached. If they criticize the asset you built or managed, you remain courteous. You never, ever take the bait.
That must be incredibly hard sometimes, especially if it feels personal. There's another quote here. Emotion sells homes. Discipline sells parks.
I love that analogy. It perfectly highlights the difference in stakes and approach. Buying a home is often deeply emotional, personal. Buying a commercial asset, like a park in this context, should be driven by objective data, by financial performance. Showing emotion signals weakness to sophisticated buyers.
So how do you know when your discipline is winning? Is there a signal?
Yes. The critical moment, the tell, is when the buyer starts actively defending their own offer. When they start justifying why their number makes sense, why their terms are reasonable, stay silent. Just listen.
Why?
Because that's the signal you've already won. They're no longer attacking your position. They're trying to convince themselves, and you, that their own position is viable. They're grappling with their own risk assessment.
That's the moment. Wow, the discipline pays off right there. The mantra is just, never get offended, get paid.
Couldn't say it better myself.
And that level of emotional control is what enables the final, ultimate piece of leverage, being genuinely willing to walk away.
Absolutely. Buyers can smell fear or neediness. If you act like you desperately need this sale, they will test you. They'll push and push until you crack.
But if you can calmly, respectfully, without any drama or anger, indicate that you're prepared to walk away if the terms aren't right.
You prove your leverage in the most powerful way possible.
Yeah.
And what usually happens? They often chase you back to the table, frequently with better terms, because now they know you're serious and have options.
It fits the whole theme.
Yeah.
Best negotiators don't strong-arm deals closed.
They let the deals close themselves. The buyer feels like they drove the process to a conclusion they wanted.
So walking away isn't actually losing leverage. It's proving you had it all along. That's the ultimate expression of controlling the time, the frame, and your own emotions.
Nicely put.
Yeah.
And if we were to synthesize this whole negotiation jujitsu philosophy, it's really never about forcing or persuading in an aggressive way. It's about guiding. Gracefully guiding the buyer to feel ownership over an outcome that ideally you've carefully predefined.
Yeah.
The essential triad we kept coming back to today is control the frame, master the silence, and respect the timing.
Okay, so key takeaways for everyone listening. Remember to argue the assumptions behind the numbers, not the numbers themselves. That's controlling the frame. Master the silence, especially harnessing the power of that, say, 10 to 15-second pause to create truth.
Right.
Use anchoring logically, and then offer well-structured options to give that crucial illusion of choice. And maybe most importantly, practice rigorous emotional discipline. Don't get offended.
Get paid.
Get paid. Okay, so final thought. We talked about negotiation being emotional warfare disguised as math, and how silence can create truth. If that holds, and you know your strength lies in the math, the hard data, the performance metrics of your asset, here's something to chew on. How might you strategically use that mathematical certainty, that undeniable data, to deliberately provoke a specific emotional response in the buyer? Not anger necessarily, but maybe anxiety about missing out, or a stronger desire for the proven performance. Could you use data to expose their underlying assumptions in an emotional way?
Ooh, that's a sharp question. Using certainty to provoke an emotion that reveals their thinking, that's definitely advanced jiu-jitsu, something for you to definitely mull over before your next big negotiation.
Indeed. Until next time, we hope this deep dive helps you close your deals without breaking a sweat. Or maybe without even saying all that much.